Welcome back, everyone already subscribed to Expose Cheaters by NDU Tale. Thank you. Your time, trust, and your comments keep this community alive. As you listen, share your thoughts, feelings, and lessons below, so we can learn together. Settle in. The truth and the twist are coming. Let's get into it. My wife stood in the doorway of the house we built together in Atlanta, arms folded, and told her brother to start carrying my things outside like I was some stranger who had overstayed his welcome. She didn't hesitate, didn't flinch. My clothes, my books, even the picture of my mother who passed 5 years ago. Everything went into trash bags. I kept asking her if this was really happening. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked past me and said, "If he doesn't leave, call the police." Her ex was sitting on the couch the whole time, watching, smirking, like he had already replaced me in my own life. Here's how it happened. 9 years earlier, I met my wife at a community fundraiser in Atlanta, Georgia. We were both broke, both tried to build something from nothing. She worked long shifts at a dental office, and I worked nights stocking shelves at a grocery store. We laughed about how life kept testing us, but we believed things would get better if we stayed loyal to each other. That belief became the foundation of our marriage. We didn't have much, but we had trust. At least, I thought we did. Looking back now, that trust was the one thing I never imagined she would shatter. In those early years, we built our life slowly and carefully. Our first apartment was tiny, tucked behind a busy street in Atlanta, with walls thin enough to hear our neighbors arguing every night. But it was ours. We cooked together, saved every extra dollar, and dreamed about owning a house someday. When we finally bought our small 2-bedroom place outside the city, we celebrated with a cheap takeout and sat on the living room floor because we couldn't afford furniture yet. She held my hand and said we made it through the hardest part together. I believed every word she said. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. If your partner told you they were going out to dinner with their ex, would you trust them, or would that be a deal breaker? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments right now. And if you enjoy real, intense stories about betrayal and karma, make sure you subscribe because the twist in this one is something she never saw coming. For a long time, life felt steady. I moved from grocery work into warehouse logistics, while she climbed higher in her office job. We started talking about having kids, about building something permanent. Our friends used to say we were solid, reliable, the couple who always had each other's backs. But somewhere along the way, things started changing in small ways I didn't understand at first. She began spending more time on her phone, more late nights with coworkers. When I asked about it, she said I was worrying too much. I wanted to believe that, so I did. The first time I heard his name again was during dinner one night. She mentioned casually that she had run into her ex while grabbing coffee near her office. She said it like it was nothing, just an old story popping back into the present. I didn't think much of it then. People run into their past all the time. But a week later, she mentioned they had talked again. Then she said he had moved back to Atlanta after living in Houston for a few years. The way she spoke about him felt familiar, comfortable in a way that made something uneasy grow inside me. At first, I told myself not to overthink it. Everyone has a past. Everyone reconnects with old friends sometimes. But the conversations about him became more frequent. She started bringing him up in stories about her day. Small details about his job, where he was living, what he was planning next. It felt strange how much she seemed to know about his life so quickly. When I asked how often they talked, she shrugged and said, "Sometimes." The words sounded harmless, but something about the way she avoided eye contact made my stomach tighten, with a quiet kind of worry. Then came the night. She told me she was meeting him for dinner. Just dinner, she said, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion. I asked why they needed to meet alone, when they could easily catch up with other friends around. She rolled her eyes immediately. That was the first time she accused me of being controlling. The word hit me harder than I expected. I had spent years supporting her, trusting her, building a life together. Now suddenly I was a problem simply for asking questions about her ex. Still, I tried to be patient. I didn't want to become the jealous husband people complain about. So I told her to go ahead if it meant that much to her. She came home late, that night smelling like restaurant food and expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. When I asked how it went, she said it was fine and went straight to the bedroom. No details, no conversation, just distance. I lay awake staring at the ceiling while the quiet in the house felt heavier than it had ever been before. The dinners kept happening, sometimes once a week, sometimes twice. Each time I asked about it, she repeated the same phrase, "He's just an old friend." But I noticed how carefully she guarded her phone now, how quickly she closed messages when I walked by. The trust we once had started slipping away piece by piece. I didn't want to believe something was wrong, but my instincts kept pushing me to pay attention. Marriage is supposed to feel like a partnership. Instead, I began feeling like an outsider in my own home. One evening, I suggested we spend the weekend together, like we used to, maybe drive down Savannah for a short trip. She barely looked up from her phone before saying she already had plans. When I asked what plans, she said she was meeting her ex for lunch and maybe seeing a movie afterward. The casual way she said it made my chest tighten. That wasn't just catching up anymore. That sounded like a date. When I pointed that out, she slammed her phone down on the table and accused me of twisting everything into something ugly. Our arguments started becoming louder, sharper. Every time I brought up how uncomfortable I felt, she turned it around and blamed me for not trusting her. She said grown adults should be able to have friends without being interrogated. I tried explaining that this wasn't about friendships. It was about respect. But she didn't want to hear it. Instead, she started spending even more time away from home. Sometimes she wouldn't come back until after midnight. The house that once felt warm and alive slowly turned into a place filled with silence and unanswered questions. One night, I asked her directly if she still had feelings for him. I didn't accuse her of cheating. I just wanted honesty. She stared at me like I had insulted her. Then she laughed, short and cold, and said I was being paranoid. According to her, nothing was happening except conversation. But the laughter stayed with me long after the argument ended. It wasn't a laugh of someone trying to reassure their partner. It sounded more like someone who had already stopped caring about what their partner believed. Weeks passed like that. Quiet tension during the day, arguments at night. The distance between us grew wider with every conversation we avoided finishing. Sometimes she stayed out so late I fell asleep before she came home. Other nights, she slept facing away from me like there was an invisible wall between us. I kept hoping we could still fix things if we talked honestly. But every attempt ended the same way, with her accusing me of trying to control her life. Then came the night everything finally broke. She was getting dressed to go out again when I asked where she was headed. She said she was meeting her ex for dinner downtown. I tried to keep my voice calm when I asked why they needed to see each other so often. That's when she snapped. Her face hardened and her voice turned sharp. "Stop being controlling," she said. "It's just my ex." The words came out like a slap. 9 years together, and somehow my concern meant nothing compared to keeping him in her life. I told her that if our marriage meant anything, she should consider how the situation looked and felt. She laughed again, louder this time. Then she said something that changed everything. She told me if I couldn't handle her having dinner with whoever she wanted, maybe I shouldn't be in the house at all. For a moment, I thought she was just speaking out of anger. But the way she stared at me, cold and certain, made it clear she meant every word. The argument kept escalating. Voices raised, old frustrations spilling out. I tried reminding her about everything we had built together, the sacrifices, the years of loyalty. But she dismissed all of it like it didn't matter anymore. According to her, I had turned into someone negative and suspicious. The more I tried to defend myself, the more she seemed convinced I was the problem. Eventually, she walked out that night without another word and didn't come back until the next afternoon. 2 weeks later, she delivered the final blow. She told me she wanted space and that it would be better if I stayed somewhere else for a while. I thought she meant a temporary break, something couples sometimes do to clear their heads. But then her brother showed up with a truck. That's when I realized this wasn't a break. This was an eviction. From my own home. I stood in the living room while her brother and cousin filled trash bags with my belongings. She watched from the doorway like it was just another chore being completed. I asked her quietly if she was really doing this. She said yes. Her ex was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he already belonged there. The humiliation of that moment felt heavier than anything I had experienced before. When I refused to leave immediately, she threatened to call the police. Hearing that from the person I once trusted more than anyone else broke something inside me. I grabbed the 2 bags and held the most important things I owned and walked out without another word. The door closed behind me with a final sound that echoed through my chest. That night, I drove aimlessly through Atlanta for hours. I didn't know where to go. Eventually, I ended up at a cheap extended stay motel near Interstate 20. The room smelled like old carpet and stale air, but it was the only place I could afford on short notice. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the wall, tried to understand how my entire life had collapsed in a single afternoon. Quick pause here. Imagine losing your home, your marriage, and everything you built in a single day. What would you do in that situation? Walk away quietly or plan your comeback? Let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying the story so far, hit the like button. It really helps the channel and lets me know you want more stories like this. The following weeks were the hardest period of my life. I worked long shifts at the warehouse and spent nights alone in that motel room. Sometimes the silence was so heavy it felt like it pressed down on my chest. I kept replaying everything that happened, wondering what I could have done differently. But every memory ended the same way, with her choosing him over the marriage we built. Friends slowly stopped calling. Some of them sided with her. Others simply didn't want to get involved in the drama. The isolation made everything worse. I realized how quickly people disappear when your life falls apart. The only thing that remained constant was my job. Every morning I forced myself to get up, show up to work, and keep moving forward 1 hour at a time. Meanwhile, I heard through mutual acquaintances that her ex had practically moved into the house immediately. They were posting photos together, going out to restaurants, acting like a happy couple. Seeing those updates felt like reopening a wound that hadn't healed yet. Eventually, I stopped checking entirely. Some things only cause pain when you keep staring at them. One night, sitting alone in the motel room, I realized something important. Waiting for her to feel guilty was pointless. She had already shown me who she was. The only thing I could control now was what happened to me next. That realization didn't erase the pain, but it gave me direction. I started focusing on rebuilding my life quietly. After work, I enrolled in an online certification program in logistics management, something I had postponed for years because life always felt too busy. Studying at night gave my mind something productive to hold on to. Instead of replaying the past, I began investing energy into a future I hadn't considered before. Months passed, then a full year. The motel room eventually turned into a small rented apartment outside Atlanta. My finances slowly stabilized as I advanced at work. The certification opened doors inside the company that hadn't existed before. I wasn't suddenly happy, but I was moving forward. That alone felt like progress. During that time, I never heard from my wife. Not a single apology. Not a single explanation. The silence confirmed something I had suspected for a while. She didn't regret what she had done. Accepting that truth hurt deeply, but it also helped me let go of false hope. 2 years after everything fell apart, a promotion opportunity appeared at one of our company's expanding facilities in Charlotte, North Carolina. It meant relocating, taking on more responsibility, and starting over somewhere new. The idea scared me at first, but it also felt like the fresh start I needed. I accepted the position and moved to Charlotte with nothing but a few boxes and a determination to keep building a better life. The city felt different from Atlanta. Quieter, slower, less crowded with memories of my past. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without constantly looking over my shoulder at what used to be. Work consumed most of my time, but that focus helped me grow. Within another year, I had saved enough money for a down payment on a modest townhouse. The day I received the keys, I stood alone in the empty living room remembering how my old life had ended. Instead of sadness, I felt something new, peace. I kept my life private. No big announcements. No dramatic updates online. I simply lived quietly, working hard and enjoying the calm stability that had slowly returned. The pain from my marriage never fully disappeared, but it stopped controlling my thoughts the way it once had. 3 years passed before I heard any news about my ex. It happened during a visit back to Atlanta to see family. I ran into an old neighbor at a grocery store who recognized me immediately. After catching up briefly, he hesitated before mentioning that things hadn't gone well at the house after I left. According to him, my ex had refinanced the home shortly after moving her ex in. They used the extra money to renovate and buy new things. For a while they lived like everything was perfect. Expensive furniture, new cars, frequent trips out of state. From the outside, it looked like the life she always wanted. But relationships built on betrayal rarely stay stable for long. Eventually, her ex started disappearing for days at a time. Arguments became frequent. Neighbors heard, shouting late at night. The same pattern that had broken my marriage began repeating itself inside their relationship. Then one day, he emptied their joint account and left. Just vanished. The neighbor said he moved back to Houston with someone else and never came back. Without his income, my ex couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments she had taken on. Within months, the bank began foreclosure proceedings. The house she once forced me out of, the house we built together, was eventually taken by the bank. Hearing that story felt surreal. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a quiet sense that life had finally balanced itself. My ex ended up moving into a small apartment across town. According to the neighbor, she rarely spoke to anyone anymore. But even then, he never mentioned her showing regret about how our marriage ended. Some people refuse to admit their mistakes, no matter what consequences follow. After hearing the news, I drove past our old neighborhood once before leaving Atlanta again. The house looked different now. New paint, different cars in the driveway. Strangers living the life we once imagined. I didn't stop the car. Some chapters are better left closed. When I returned to Charlotte, I unlocked the door to my townhouse and stepped inside the quiet living room. No shouting, no tension, just the calm sound of my own breathing. The life I had rebuilt might not have been the one I planned years ago, but it was stable and entirely mine. My wife once told me to leave if I couldn't accept her ex being part of our lives. So I left. I lost my home, my marriage, and the future I thought we would share. But in the end, the same choices that destroyed our relationship destroyed the life she tried to build without me. Meanwhile, I quietly rebuilt mine piece by piece. No revenge, no confrontation, just distance, growth, and peace. And sometimes that kind of quiet success is, if the story shocked you, wait until you hear the next one. Some betrayals are even worse, and some karma hits even harder. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And tell me in the comments, do you think she got the karma she deserved, or was losing the house not enough?